If you want to learn how I turned this room into this room, then keep on watching. Hi friends! Thank you so much for clicking to watch this video. If you're new here, my name is Sandy, and if you're not new, then thank you so much for coming back. On this channel, we talk about all things interior design, and in today's video, I'm showing you how to stencil a wall step by step. And at the end of this video, if you like it, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any more videos like this. First things first, let's talk about all the materials you're going to need. For this DIY, you're going to need paint brushes, paint rollers, paint tray and disposable liners, a drop cloth, easy tack adhesive spray, a ladder. I didn't have one and I had to get creative, so you're gonna see about that. Painter's tape, paper towels, a gallon of the base paint you're going to use. I used white, so I had a gallon of white paint, and a gallon of the stencil color you're going to use. My stencil was teal, so I had a gallon of teal paint. The Stencil Essentials pack, I will link all of these items down below, but that Stencil Essentials pack has in it a small bristle brush, and I believe it also has a dense foam roller, like a small foam roller, and it has a stencil level so that you can make sure your stencil is straight. For this particular stencil, I did not need that because it's more of an organic, free-flowing shape, so I didn't need to make sure that it was straight. But if you're going to do a more geometric stencil, then I recommend that you have that. And last but not least, you need a stencil. Duh! The star of the show. I picked an organic shape for my first stencil. It's like this free-flowing shape. It's called Roses All Over, so it was floral. And it's really forgiving when everything isn't geometric. So if it's your first stencil, then I recommend doing something that's a bit more free-flowing like I did. And if you want to go with something that's more rigid and more geometric, then just be really, really careful and follow all the rules that I'm about to list. I got my stencil from Cutting Edge Stencils off Amazon, but they do have a website with many more stencils, and I'll list them down below so that you can see. This is not sponsored in any way. This is just where I got my stencil in case you guys want to know. When you're going to start your stencil wall, the first thing that I recommend to you to do is definitely to paint a sample. I painted a sample on my wall of the different paints that I was considering using for a base paint. So I ended up doing a white base paint with blue flowers on top, and I also painted a sample of a blue base paint with white flowers on top. I share all this on Instagram. If you do follow me on Instagram, then you already know, and I polled people to see which one they liked better, the blue flowers or the white flowers, and the blue flowers won, and that's actually what I ended up doing. So if you're interested in seeing that and getting a first look of my DIYs and videos and the behind the scenes, then you can follow me on Instagram or DM me if you have any questions about things. I'm really responsive on there, and it was really fun polling you guys to see what you liked because it's what I like too, and I ended up picking it. So it feels like you guys kind of had a hand in helping me decide what to do. One of the reasons I recommend painting a sample is not just to see the base paint, but also so that you can get all your mistakes out of the way. I'm gonna insert it somewhere on the screen hopefully, but when I did my sample, I bought a flat paint that was teal, and I bought an eggshell paint that was white, because normally in bedrooms you want to use an eggshell paint. And when you're painting a stencil wall, you want to use a flat paint because the flat paint dries faster, and as you stencil, you apply the stencil and you paint, and then you move it again, you want the paint to have dried so it doesn't smear everywhere. So knowing that, I went and I got the blue paint flat, but I also planned on painting the rest of my room white, so I got an eggshell white paint. And when I put the white paint on top of the flat paint and painted the white flowers, when I went to peel the stencil off, it was really hard, and it like stuck to the wall and it teared off the paint. So my walls were actually gray before, and when I went to rip off the stencil, it peeled even the gray paint off, and I was just seeing like basic drywall that was behind it, and I was like, oops. You know, mistakes of a first-time DIYer. When you're going to be actually painting the stencil, it needs to be with a flat paint. It doesn't matter if your base coat is not flat too, but the actual stencil paint does need to be flat. And then I was like, well, now that I know eggshell paint is ripping the teal off the wall, I guess I'm gonna go with blue flowers. So that decision was made for me. And you guys voted for it, and I also ended up liking it. So I'm glad that that worked out. But just a tip, paint a sample so that you don't rip all the paint off the walls like I did. After painting the sample, I cleared everything out of my room and I laid down the drop cloth so that I could cover the floor. The mistake I made was I only got one drop cloth and I covered half of the carpet in my room. And I ended up getting paint. I thought I could be super careful, but I ended up getting paint on the carpet. Fortunately, it's under my bed, so when I put my bed back in my room, you can't even see it. But for anyone else that happens to, it could happen in a place where it's more conspicuous. So make sure you get 2 drop cloths and not just one like I did, or get 2 so that you could, or get one really large one so that it covers the whole entirety of your space. Don't think that just because you're not painting in an area that you're not going to get paint there, because I definitely did. You also want to line your ceilings and baseboards with blue painter's tape. I did not do this, so I don't have some footage to show you. I thought I could be super careful and that I got this. I did not got this, guys. I didn't got it at all. I definitely got paint on the baseboards. Thankfully, I was painting my room white and my baseboards are white, but they are a different sheen, so if you look really closely, you can see where I messed up. But I just recommend taking the extra time to lay the blue paint out, because that's really gonna help you in the long run. And don't forget to remove all of the outlets and light switches in your room. Removing the faces of them helps protect them from getting paint all over them. At first I was just gonna be careful and paint around it, but I'm really glad that I ended up taking them off entirely, because it really looked a lot better when I put them back on and the stencil goes behind them instead of accidentally getting paint on them. So make sure to take the time to do that. So now that your room is entirely clear, you've lined the baseboards and the ceiling, and you have removed all of the outlets, it is time to paint your base coat. I chose white for my base coat, and my room was originally gray before. So I immediately just started painting white on the walls, and that was a mistake. I thought that the gray wasn't too dark, but apparently it was much darker than I thought, because when I was done painting, it was very patchy. And I ended up using an entire gallon of white paint on one wall, because you could still see the gray no matter how much paint I put on top of it. And I also was pressing too hard on the paint roller, which was making it one splash, but it also creates these streaks because it pushes the paint out to the side of the rollers. So do not do what I did. Just apply normally. You don't have to apply a lot of pressure. If you feel like there's too much paint someplace, it'll even itself out the more paint that you put on the wall. So don't worry about that too much, but just don't apply pressure the way that I did. And because I ended up using an entire gallon of paint, I had to go back to Lowe's to get another gallon of white paint and a gallon of primer. When I went there, the guy was super nice and helped, and I told him the issue that I was experiencing, and he was like, you know, this is a primer that's good for when you're switching colors. So I got the primer, got more white paint, then I came home. Once I came back from Lowe's with a gallon of paint and a gallon of primer, I got back to work painting the walls with the help of my roommate. I enlisted her help, and thank God, because it went so much faster when there were 2 people painting and not 1. So if you can get help for this project, then definitely recommend getting someone to help you. This would have potentially taken 3 days if I did not have her help me, because I was exhausted, and you know, a girl had to take her cookie and ice cream breaks. So there's that. When we added the primer to the wall, it made a huge difference. I only needed 1 coat of white paint to cover the rest of the room, the 3 walls, instead of using a whole gallon for 1 wall, which is not economically efficient. The primer was really great for going from a dark color to a light color. And it even covered up the patch of blue that I had painted as a practice. So I was really happy about that, because the teal was very intense. In fact, I think the color is called Intense Teal. So a little on the nose. So after everything was painted white, I was completely done with my base coat. The whole room felt so much brighter and bigger and more inviting, and it bounced light better, which is really great, especially because I film videos in here. So it really helps with lighting in that way. On the Cutting Edge Stencil site and in the instructions that it gives you, it says to wait 24 hours after you've painted your base coat to paint the stencil on. So I waited 2 to 3 hours and just let Jesus take the wheel, and I was like, you know what, this might work out, this might not, we're just gonna do it. In retrospect, that was a bad idea, and you should definitely wait 24 hours, but it ended up working out great. The paint was totally dry, the stencil came out great, and we're gonna go into that in more detail, but I recommend, again, doing what the site said. So when I started the stencil, I took the stencil, laid it out flat, and I used the spray adhesive on one side, and the side that you spray it on is the side that you actually stick it to the wall on. When you stick it to the wall and then you paint and then you take it off and you align it and you paint it again and then you do it and then you repeat that process, you can only repeat that process 3 times before you have to spray some more adhesive. I did not know that, and at some point it like fell and it created this smear on the wall, and I was really annoyed about it, but after the whole wall was done, you really can't tell. I mean, I can, and I see it next to my nightstand, and it bothers me deeply in my soul. Anywho, I got that smear and I wasn't happy about it, but just so you know, after each 3 placements, spray it again, and that will definitely keep it nice and tacky. If you don't want to use a spray adhesive, you do not have to at all. You can actually just use painter's tape. I like that I could just stick it on the wall and I didn't have to keep taking it off and taping it and taking it off and taping it, so I preferred that. But again, if you don't want to use a spray adhesive because it does get sticky on the floor, then I would recommend just using tape. And this is the most important tip, okay? I have to get, this is the most important tip, okay? Listen up. Do not put too much paint on your roller. This is the most important thing. I'm so serious. If you take nothing else away from this video, take away this. When you put paint onto the roller, you need to get paper towels. This is what paper towels are for. And you bunch them up and you roll the excess off of the roller. And it seems like you don't have enough paint, and you do have to kind of keep applying it. Like, you can't take one dip of paint and roll it on the whole entirety of the stencil. You do have to go back like 2 or 3 times, but that's much better than having too much paint. Trust me. There were a few times where I forgot to roll the excess off onto a paper towel, and it seeped through, and it doesn't have the nice little spaces, the white spaces in between it. There are some mistakes on the wall, which is behind me, by the way. This is my headboard and the wall is here. I can see them when I'm up close, but when you step away from the wall, be forgiving of your mistakes, because when you step away from the wall, you really can't tell at all, and it all looks really good. So another tip for when you're stenciling a wall. This particular stencil that I had, I really liked that it had a marker to let you know where to position the stencil when you were going to repeat the pattern. So you put it on, and then you take it off, and you put it on again, and you're like, well, how do I make sure that it's lined up? This stencil, again, was really forgiving because it has an organic kind of rose shape and it's free-flowing, but if it had a more rigid stencil, this would, again, be probably even more important. But it has, if you go onto the website of Cutting Edge Stencil, go onto their site, they have pictures to show you exactly where you would line it up. Again, there's like a little, for me, I guess a petal, because these were roses, it's like a little petal on the corner of the stencil, and when you go, and it looks like it's not connected to the rest of the stencil, but when you take it off, and you connect it to the stencil that you just painted, it actually all makes sense. And just go onto the website, and they're gonna have a picture of every single stencil that they have and where that repeat marker is, because that's gonna be crucial in making sure that everything looks uniform on your wall. So again, guys, you are going to make mistakes. When I was done stenciling with the large stencil piece and needed to go in with the finishing stencil piece, I noticed that I had misaligned the stencil in a few places, and there were these big white lines, these rifts, if you will, in the stencil, and I was like, oh no, that doesn't look good, it's pretty obvious. So I then went in with the finishing piece of the stencil and just applied it to the wall and used a little bristle brush and just painted it in. Used a little bit of teal paint and just painted in random petals, basically, to kind of cover it up. So for that finishing piece, that is what you use for the ceilings and the baseboards. When you take the stencil and you fill in the whole wall with the big piece of the stencil, there are going to be spaces in between the ceiling and the baseboards and the corners of the walls, and it looks like the stencil has like a border, a white border. You could leave it like that if that's the look that you're going for, but I wasn't. I wanted it to be flush against the ceiling and flush against the baseboards and in the corners. So there's like a sliver of stencil that they give you in the package that is smaller than the rest of the stencil, and it's easy to push up against the ceiling. And with that sliver piece, you go in with the smaller bristle brush when you're up against the baseboards and when you're really, really close to the ceiling. So it was really helpful. It did take some time to get that right. Again, that piece is crucial if you want your walls to not have a border around it and to be flush with the ceilings and the baseboards. So after you do that, you are absolutely done. Give yourself a pat on the back. You just stenciled a wall. I know I had to give myself a pat on the back, okay? The actual stenciling part took me about 5 to 6 hours, and that's a long time. I think it was because it was my first time stenciling, and I was really cautious, and I just really wasn't really sure what I was doing. But if I stencil another wall, which I actually intend to in my dining room, then I think it'll go a lot faster, maybe like 3 hours. Also, my dining room is smaller. This was a pretty sizable wall. So that's something to consider. And if you have a larger wall, it could take you even longer. In the end, guys, I'm really happy with how this room turned out. Before, it looked kind of dull and it just didn't have any character or personality. And it was a little dark because the gray paint was kind of eating the light in the room. But now it looks so much brighter with the white paint in it. And the blue stencil gives it a pop of color and much more character and personality. It just feels more fun in here, and I really, really like that, and I can't wait to finish the rest of my room. If you guys want to see more videos like this, then please give us a thumbs up and tell me down below. I am going to be doing a reading nook in my room and just decorating it in some other areas, so I would like to film those and shows with you guys. If you want to see them, please again give us a thumbs up and comment down below and let me know if you do want to see that. And I say this at the end of all of my videos. What are you guys waiting for? All right, just marry me already and hit that subscribe button. Okay, if you like it, put a ring on. That's what Beyonce said. I say if you like it, subscribe. All right, don't even need a ring. Too expensive. Just hit that subscribe button, totally free. If you like it, subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.